Welcome to another episode of the News Navigators with me, Jeremy Deacon.
And me, Jonathan Starling.
We're recording this on Thursday, February the 19th. Tomorrow, Friday, is the budget. So we're just going to have a little fun speculating about what might be in the budget and who is going to please and who isn't is going to please. And there was a very interesting report released recently, the annual report of the Bermuda judiciary, which raised quite a few issues, not least about the independence of the judiciary via their pay. And it's a fascinating thought. I think, first of all, Jonathan, we both talked about this, and I think it's only right and proper that we should pay a short tribute or a tribute to Ceola Wilson. I didn't work with Ceola a huge amount, but I certainly came across her a lot. And to me, she's a spiky character, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. I used to sit back at press conferences when she was there and let her do the heavy lifting because she was not afraid of asking the tough questions. She was not afraid of taking no for an answer. And I just loved the way she made them squirm, ministers, and she wouldn't back down. And to me, that is such an important part of being a journalist. We need more people like her who won't take no for an answer, who will say, often on live TV or live radio, that's not good enough. And I think, she was brilliant at that kind of thing. Sheila was a good reporter, and I do wonder sometimes how far she may have gone and whether there would have been a good chance, I think, of her being the first black female editor. And I think that's long overdue in Bermuda
The
anyway.
Royal Gazette, you mean?
Of any newspaper, such as there are now, but of the Royal Gazette now, it's long overdue. Um, but yeah, she'll be missed. She'll be greatly missed, and I know a lot of ministers will be sighing a sigh of relief.
She was certainly formidable. I always celebrated her confidence. As you say, she was willing to ask questions and she wouldn't be fobbed off by kind of misdirection questions. She was laser focused. Um, so, yeah, it was very sad to hear of her passing the other day.
It was, and I hope she's somewhere up there giving St. Peter at the Pearly Gates a hard time.
I'm sure she would.
I'm sure she would. um, yeah, rest in peace, Yola, and our huge condolences to her family. Like I said, tomorrow is the budget. Eventually, David Burt's last as finance minister. I say that because I don't know about you, Jonathan. I keep hearing rumours that he wants to stay on as finance minister when he steps down as premier. So, and this is the first budget where he'll have significantly more money to play with because
The
the
CIT.
corporate income tax will have been collected, and reports are suggesting an extra 600 million or so in revenue on top of the usual revenue from taxes, etc. Now, we had the pre-budget report last year, so I don't think there's going to be too many surprises. We know that he's going to follow the Tax Reform Commission recommendations partially or completely, he
Right.
said, which among those were cutting the employer payroll tax portion, uh, eliminating duty on the production, supply, and delivery of electricity, the cost of living tax there. Also looking at relieving health insurance costs for the underinsured and the elderly. So I think we can see more money into the health insurance system. And also importantly, he said, I'm going to quote this, the debt over assets rule over a rolling period of 3 years, of at least 3 years, at least 70% of net corporate income tax revenues should be devoted to paying debt interest and reducing net debt or accumulating net financial assets. So I think we know roughly what's going to happen. Obviously, as we all know, the devil's in the detail. The Tax Reform Commission did bring out its waterfall system for corporate
Mhm.
income tax, and very quickly running through it did say stability fund 100 million a year, that sinking fund 200 million, senior healthcare support 30 mil, underinsured healthcare 12 million, Employer payroll tax reduction 68, low income healthcare subsidy 18 million, utility tax relief 8 million, employee payroll tax reduction 24 million, employer health insurance subsidy 19 million, and the elimination of the foreign currency purchase tax of 31 million. As I said, a lot of those have been indicated that are actually going to happen tomorrow. How much in terms of money will be interesting. What are your predictions, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the CIT is a bit of the corporate income tax is a bit of a game changer, and this is the first budget where that's happening, and it's also, as you mentioned, the last budget that the premier is going to be giving as premier. Whether he is reappointed as a minister of finance in the future, we don't know. The reason we say that, listeners, is because the premier has already said he's not contesting the constitutional leadership election for the PLP's leadership in this coming October. And whoever becomes the new leader of the PLP and thus the new premier has the right to appoint their own ministers. And there's no guarantee that David Burt will be made a minister of finance. He might want to take a little break.
I wouldn't be
um,
surprised.
yeah, but at the same time, with this being his last budget, his last known budget, you never know what's going to happen in the future. He's going to want to go out with a legacy. And I think his emphasis is going to be on trying to get that, show that, look, the PLP has reined in government debt and we are now creating a budget surplus going forward and an end to austerity. I think it's going to try to go out with a bang, but like a responsible bang, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a responsible bang. I think that does make sense. I kind of, I think we know that cost of living is a massive issue,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there'll be a big emphasis on the cost of living. Whether that's through reducing fees on utilities, whether that's through a
Hmm.
tax reduction for employees and employers for their payroll, we'll see. But that's the major issue. We had the reports about inflation edging up last September, massively out of date. But among that was a big rise in food, and among that also was a big rise in health insurance costs. And those are huge drivers of cost of living. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see an awful lot of emphasis on that.
And there's
I think we'll
also a
see an
lot of,
emphasis on infrastructure as well.
yeah, I was about to say there's a lot of capital infrastructure which is coming to the end of its lifetime, and we need to re replace them. I
The
mean, Tynes
bridges.
Bay is a massive one. There's been long running talk since Hurricane Fabian about the swing bridge. St. George St. David's type thing.
Well, the plans have been drawn up for that, haven't they? But I think it was a 20 million price tag.
Yeah, and
So
well, CIT.
don't be surprised. Don't be
Yeah,
surprised
and there's
if that
also
happens.
the agricultural. I forget his proper name right now, but the agricultural center up by Cedar Bridge, up by
Yeah.
Prospect. That's been in dire need of economic investment, and there's been plans to build a new agricultural center there. That's very important for local agriculture in terms of having storage for their crops. Going,
Well, that was, if you remember, the planning permission or permission for that was given just before the 2025 election,
yeah, and so
and
I
nothing's
expect
happened
this.
since.
I mean, part of that was in the last election, farmers and fishers were um, protesting,
Yeah, it was
and
that was a huge piece of electioneering, and actually, I think that was announced after the election was called, and probably should not have been announced.
well, I mean, there have been plans going back a couple years about replacing the agricultural center. But I agree, it should not have necessarily been announced after Parliament is prorogued. Once the writ is dropped,
Yeah,
everything is supposed to go into kind of hibernation. No new
yeah, there's no
government
policy
announcement.
announcements allowed.
Yes,
Yeah. Anyway,
but I would
digress. We
expect that to be one of the capital
will be
infrastructure
surprised.
things
Yeah,
going in.
yeah. It'd be
I
interesting.
was going to say that education infrastructure was going to be raised, but the whole education reform system is in a bit of a hiatus. I know we're going to talk about that
That's
more.
a polite way of saying for it. Yeah.
Yeah. um, the education reform system is somewhat paused at the moment while they do a rethink. We're going to
So
look at that
just
more, I
just
think, next
just to
week.
put that in, just to put that in context, Crystal Caesar announced that there is a pause, and You can stay in middle school, or you can stay in primary school, and it looks like the two systems are going to run side by side. So your parish and middle school will run side by side. Instead of getting rid of middle schools, they're going to stay. It's all incredibly confusing. It really is. But as Jonathan was saying there, we are going to have a deep dive on that next week, because it's going to take us a week to actually research it and get our
Get
heads
our heads
around it.
around it. Another big factor is, of course, government debts. I believe there's a huge loan that has to be repaid in January
That's right.
2027. I want to say around $600 million.
It's around 600 mil. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I seem to recall there was $500 million set aside for that.
Right.
And well, I expect that to be in the budget tomorrow. I think you raised the question whether they pay the whole thing off.
No, what I want to see is how much they put aside for debt repayment tomorrow.
I mean, no matter how much they put in, there's always going to be someone saying that that it's not enough, and all of the CIT goes into it. I think I prefer more of the middle way, pay off as much as we can, but also make sure that we're maintaining and investing in the things that need to be done now.
I think that's very true, and I think the cost of living is a really serious issue for Bermudians, and anything that can free up some cash or can subsidise the cost of living in some way is really,
Well,
really important.
we saw that cost of living report that came out last year from under Minister Alexa Lightbourne, the Minister of Home Affairs. And we had a podcast about it at the time, and I think we noted that some of the plans were more like concepts of a plan rather
Yeah.
than actual plans.
Yes.
So it will be interesting to see how the budget plays into that, because then you can see what aspects of that cost of living agenda is now being prioritized.
Well, I
Um,
imagine if the budget can only really focus on finances, so I imagine it'll be about putting more cash in people's pockets
yes,
through
but you can see
eliminate.
what things are going to be financed, type thing.
It's going to be, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think the main driver is going to be tax relief, though, in terms of
Yeah, I mean,
payroll tax.
they're reducing duty on a lot of basket staples.
They did
Um,
say they'd increase that basket, didn't they, of staples that were duty free. They'll be interested to see whether there's a list of that. I agree. But I
because I
wonder,
mean,
I wonder
mhm.
if the capital projects might be things like, better investment in solar.
Could be. I mean,
Green
Colonel
as
Birch, when he
oil.
was the Minister of Public Works, he was trying to really drive a lot of the government-owned buildings to have more solar on it. The idea being to reduce their Belco bill
Mm.
and then save the public
But
sector money in the
that
longer
seems to have
term.
gone very quiet, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we have a new Minister of Public Works, Joshe Hayward, and of course, he's been
Adams.
focused more on the roads in the initial stage.
Joshe
So,
Adams, mate. You're conflating two ministers there.
what did I say?
Joshe Hayward.
My bad. I'm
All
sorry.
right. Yes, all
I should have had another espresso.
right.
But that actually raises a good point. Jason Hayward is, many people I hear are thinking he's a likely contender for the leadership election coming up in October.
We digress, but it's worth it. I could have sworn at some stage he ruled himself out. But it's funny you say that because a couple of people have contacted me to say that on overseas visits, when David Burt and Jason Hayward are both there, David Burt is basically introducing him as his successor.
Right. Well, the only reason I mention that is because with the budget, we're going to kind of see the different ministers and different contenders for the leadership going to try to hog the limelight to raise their profile. I mean, they're speaking more to PLP members who are members of the public as well, but trying to get their support for the upcoming leadership election. So that's one thing that I am going to be keeping an eye on to
It's
see
very
what
true.
the different leadership contenders are going to be saying about their ministry and the budget. And that's the reason I was thinking about Jason Hayward there. We also know Zane De Silva, the deputy premier and the minister of housing. He's already thrown his hat in the ring, and housing is a big issue. So I'd expect housing will be also something to watch in the budget.
Well, they have a series press conferences, don't they, after the budget?
They
So
do.
next week we'll see different ministers. We'll see which ones stand up to the public and the scrutiny and what they say. It'll be very interesting to watch. I agree, but I think we can talk about cost of living reductions as a certainty, infrastructure. I think also um, those things to try and get job creation, increase local spending, perhaps, and obviously the debt reduction. Um, there's a couple of things I personally haven't heard much about, and whether you have, Jonathan, I don't know. I've not seen an awful lot about the Stability Fund, and I think that's absolutely crucial because CI corporate income tax revenue can be very volatile, or will be very volatile. I've not seen anything about that. I may have missed it in terms of maybe they named it something else. Maybe they went into the sinking fund and I missed it, but I think that's going to be absolutely crucial. But I wonder also, um, and I'm taking this isn't an original thought by any means because I saw it on a comment on one of the RG stories who said that basically the budget won't include long term planning. David Burt has said it will include long term planning, um, and there is an opportunity there. I was wondering what form, because normally kind of budgets are for the next year, aren't they, or 2 years, often to please the electorate, and are not necessarily long term. But I'm really intrigued as to what could be long term. I mean, obviously the debt reduction is long term, but what else could we be looking at here? I'm kind of
Well,
wondering
infrastructure
what
is
else
kind
it
of a
could
long
be.
term thing. It's got a long shelf life. So I would imagine that would be part of it. We don't have a national infrastructure plan to identify what needs to be done and the priority, to triage it. That's something I think we should do. Because you're right, budgets are often just 1 year term, and that makes it hard for you to plan longer term projects because there's
Yeah.
no guarantee that you're going to get the support you need for multi years. So yeah, I could see an argument for even multi year budgets for some things.
Well, David, but the Premier did suggest a budget every 2 years, didn't they? And that's partly because of the planning issues of having to plan every year instead of every 2 years. But I'm just wondering, whether we could see a substantial amount of money perhaps being put in some sort of sovereign fund
Right.
for future projects, or whether we're going to see a long-term plan funded over multiple years by corporate income tax. I'm really interested to see if he elaborates more on this issue of long-term planning. I mean, it could just be universal healthcare, of course, which has been a long time talked about and nothing's really happened yet.
I mean, I do expect the next couple of years to be very volatile economically, globally speaking, and that's of course going to have an impact on Bermuda. I think tourism is probably going to see a bit of a decline this year, especially from the American visitors who we are largely dependent on.
Except we will see the reopening of the Southampton Princess in the
Yeah,
summer, which will have a massive impact. But I hear where you're coming from, and it was last week, wasn't it? The Straits of Hormuz were closed for a few hours by Iran.
yeah. I mean, by the time this podcast goes live, there might be another war going on, right? Um,
Somewhere.
yeah, but just economically, like America, I can see the American people are going to have a lot less liquid cash to to go for tourism.
Maybe their economy seems to be doing quite well, bizarrely,
I'm not convinced that that is like it is at the moment, but I'm
it
not
is at the
convinced
moment.
that
Yeah,
that is indicative of what's going to happen over the next 12 months. I think it's a
agreed.
bit of a bubble going on a few areas.
So all the more reason then to have some clarity,
Yeah,
certainty over this stability fund,
yeah.
which is going to be absolutely massive, I think. Um,
It's also going to be interesting how the opposition plays out with this, because of course they've got a new leadership. There's still a little instability over in the opposition camp at the moment. They haven't done a cabinet shuffle. We came to the idea. I think you were saying that you would expect the cabinet shuffle to be post budget, just to make sure that no one's not having to learn a new brief overnight. In
they
very
got
quick,
Doug DeCuto, and what is this, his second budget now?
I think so. As the shadow finance.
So he's reasonably seasoned. He understands how it all works.
Yeah,
We'll get
I
their
actually I'd
response
imagine
to
he
it
would still
tomorrow.
probably be the finance minister,
I think so,
shadow
yeah.
finance under any shuffle.
Mm. But, it's going to be interesting. I'm really intrigued by the budget. Is it David Burt's last hurrah? Is he going to do a legacy budget for him? Is he going to be sensible, long term planning, millions upon millions in the stability fund? He's
Mhm.
got to answer the cost of living crisis the best he can. It's all around quite interesting. I don't because they've never had so much money to play with. I mean, you've got an extra 600 million at your disposal.
Yeah.
The
I mean,
temptation
hopefully,
just come, but the temptation just go and blast it all,
well,
put it on red or black.
I certainly would like to invest it in things that increase our self sufficiency. So, renewable energy to reduce our dependence on imports, agriculture. There's no way we're ever going to produce enough food to supply all our needs. But I think there's a good argument to increase our agricultural production, or at least to reduce wastage, to
I agree.
increase our self sufficiency. All of that gives us more sort of autonomy. And we're seeing going ahead right now with the way America's national security agenda is going there. You don't want to be too dependent on them. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. So I do think we should start investing in things that diversify our abilities so that we can be more autonomous.
I agree, and I think in particular renewable energy. What's wrong? Somebody breaking in?
I don't know. You heard the dog?
No, it was a dog, was it? All right.
Yeah, it was barking. So I was trying to find out what was going on. It was right by my ear.
When he record these things, well, thank goodness we are recording them. Thing is, I can't edit them out. I think renewables is crucial. We hear a lot of talk about renewables, and nothing really ever happens.
I
Bringing back a
mean,
great,
I was thinking about what we're seeing, what's happening in Cuba at the moment. They've got this massive stranglehold. It's really a crime against humanity, in my
I
opinion.
agree. I agree.
And Cuba is trying to massively increase their amount of renewable energy capacity. China's sending them shiploads of solar panels right now just to try to function. And it's really distressing to me to see how CARICOM is just kind of not doing anything to support Cuba in this.
Is
I
Cuba
mean,
in
Mexico's
CARICOM?
being strong armed, Venezuela's being taken over as an American colony already. Just last week, we had, well, just a couple of days ago, the Americans bombed a ship within the national waters of, I think, St. Vincent.
Yeah,
Not international waters anymore, but actually within St. Vincent waters.
yeah.
You know, they're just steamrolling over our sovereignty in the Caribbean. So that's why I was thinking about the need to increase Bermuda's self sufficiency.
Well, I think we should do anyway and wean ourselves off oil because I mentioned the Strait of Hormuz was closed only for a couple of hours. You just need to close it for a month, and the oil prices are going to go through the roof. It would be good to see kind of investment there. I don't know. What do you think, listeners, viewers? We would love to get your reaction to the budget once you've listened to it or read it. If you email the newsnabs at gmail.com or WhatsApp 5342205. If you don't want your name read out, that's fine. Just make sure you say so. But we'd love to hear your opinions. Hopefully, we're all going to be a lot richer at the end of it.
The other thing you mentioned earlier, Jeremy, was the judicial report, and that's always quite interesting. It comes about this time of year each year, and it's
Yeah,
always very interesting reading. I don't think it gets enough coverage in other media.
it didn't. That's one of the reasons I wanted to pick it up because there's some extremely interesting takeouts here.
Yeah,
I
I mean, I
mean,
remember even last year's one was fascinating to read, and this one as well. It's
well,
interesting.
you'll have a different opinion, but I got three takeouts.
Hmm.
One was the increase, continuing increase, they say, in litigation between citizens and the government. Unfortunately, it doesn't list what they are. There's been a few that I can remember either reporting on or reading about, but I'm really intrigued in that. Which then actually leads on very nicely to the issue they've got with judicial pay.
Yeah, that's
And
one thing I had never really thought about too much. So it was very interesting to see how the system works. So right now they're tied to the civil service
they're tied to the
pay
civil
scales.
service, yes. They don't have an
Yeah.
independent body that sets their pay.
Hmm.
So the judges and co have been asked to rule on cases involving the government but they're paid by government, so it raises the spectre of a lack of independence.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any actual indication that they are being influenced by their decisions, but it's the optics, as you say, which is key,
It's the
and
optics, and yeah,
it leaves it
and it's that
open
extra
to
firewall, isn't it?
exploitation
Hmm?
going forward.
Yeah, but it puts that extra firewall there, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And like you said, there is no indication that's happening. I must stress that, but it is, like you said, the optics, and that there is potential there. Sorry, Judge, you're not going to get your pay rise unless you rule for me.
yeah.
It could happen. I mean, it hasn't, and I don't think it would. But like you say, it's the optics.
My only
And then,
question is then who does determine their pay? I mean, you don't want necessarily to let the wolf in charge of the hen house either, right?
well, they're
Not that
talking
I'm
about
saying judges are wolves in case I'm ever in before court.
careful what you say. Don't get to get hauled before the judge, Jonathan. I want to get back into the island, please. Hey,
But I'm just saying, how do we make sure that their pay is not self-serving either?
separate body, independent, separate body. Um, whether that separate body gets money, whether it gets its own revenue, whether it gets its own finance, I don't know.
I mean, it's still public monies no matter what.
It is. I think that has to be sorted out. But I've been quite intrigued. I've never thought about it before that there does probably need to be a separation there. And then we can go back on these in more detail. But I wanted to the third takeout um, was Justice Wolfe,
Hmm.
who did the criminal division report. One Wolfe, and he's calling this 20 years of young men who have been charged and convicted of violence offences. He's calling it epidemic proportions and urging that it should be treated as a public health issue. Very, very strong words from the judge. Normally, they don't get involved in things like that too much, don't get a bit political, but I think this is pretty political because there's only one organisation that can treat it as a public health issue, and that is government.
I mean, Justice Wolf has been kind of on the forefront of this from the judiciary for some years. I've always been quite impressed by his comments on various matters.
I have.
Um,
I've only met him a couple of times, and that was to do with Home, the homeless charity, who's helping them draft legislation. But he's
right.
an extremely committed person,
Mhm.
really is. But yeah, I mean, going back, continued increase in litigation between citizen and the government. Now, why is that? Is this because poorly drafted legislation, and there have been examples of this?
Well, I mean,
Is it
I'm not
because
entirely
government's
sure
not
which
following its own
ones.
rules?
I'm not sure which ones they involve. The ones that I can think of off the top of my head is the was it mailboxes tried to sue the Bermuda post office.
It won as well. I mean, that was
Yeah,
a classic case, wasn't it? Because the RFP had rules hadn't been followed properly.
and the other one that I can think of, I'm not sure if this really counts as government because it's the regulatory authority, which is autonomous, independent. Was the I want to say a lot of the telecoms carriers recently lodged a suit against the RA for price controls. I haven't followed that in detail, so I don't really know the ins and outs
I think
of
that's
that
still going through the
case.
process. But yeah, it's one common Digicel did that.
Right.
Yeah. But
I
I
mean, I
guess the
remember the judge
regulator,
saying that the telecoms companies have a good, strong case, but I don't understand the ins
no,
and outs.
there's probably negotiations going on behind the scenes, mediations going on behind the scenes. Those are the examples I got as well. The others I got were sort of the AG versus the Information Commissioner, but I'm not sure that really counts.
I mean, that's kind of
Corporation of
government
Hamilton
against
against
government.
the AG. Huh?
That's not quite government against government, but they're both publicly funded bodies, right?
This is they specifically say citizen,
Right.
and I'm intrigued by that. And the continued increase potholes. I did a
Well, that
story
goes to
once
the
that said it wouldn't be impossible for people to sue government over potholes if they could prove the damage was due to a pothole.
yeah,
I don't know, but I was just intrigued of why that case. And then, like I said, we talked about the pay. I think probably it's a good idea to get up a separate body.
yeah. And what you're talking about that epidemic of violence, I mean, we talk about that regularly. We had those really heinous murders last year. I fully expect us to see similar murders this year and next year. I don't see any end to it in a sense. I know that sounds like I'm a bit numb or desensitized to it. I am. We've had all these tragedies, and I don't really know how to solve it.
Well, we've had lots and lots and lots of panels, discussions, groups, organisations. Got the the multi-agency gang prevention team, the gang violence reduction team. We've had the national violence reduction strategy. Goes on and on and on. But
I mean, part of
I,
it is going to have to be, part of it is an austerity issue, and that ties back into the budget. If we can increase investment into rehabilitation to reduce recidivism in prisons, that's great. If we can have greater restorative or restitutive justice instead of punitive justice, that's great. But we also need to invest in tackling economic inequality, so that goes to the cost of living agenda. We need to invest in better education and other infrastructure. That's budget. We just talked about the education reform. It's it's not a there's no quick fix to any of this. It has to be multiple fronts, if that makes sense.
totally agree. Everything comes into play in this. I totally agree. It's interesting. The Wolf is talking about extremely early intervention, starting at the age of 5, talking about life skills being
Yeah.
taught in schools. I don't know if that happens now, but really, really early intervention. I think that's probably a good idea if it doesn't happen now. He's also talking about introducing a full-time psychiatric care in the prisons.
Which
Again, if that doesn't
I'm
exist,
shocked
that's
that we don't
quite
have.
astonishing. What's that?
I'm shocked that we don't have that at the moment.
If he, I mean, I'm assuming the judge knows. Therefore, that's why he's put it in there. And I'm
Yeah.
shocked we don't have that.
I mean,
And
that ties into the rehabilitation aspect, you know?
exactly, exactly. I mean, I like everybody knows now. In the UK, I had a fascinating radio program about how psychiatrist goes into prisons and he has bottles of potions. They're all different smells, and he uses them and talks to the prisoners about where it takes them. And often it takes them back to their childhood or a happy place when they get married or something like that. And it was such a good idea. It got them to reminisce about good times. And, if we don't have that kind of thing, not that specifically, but psychiatric care, I find that quite
Well, I
unbelievable.
mean, we've covered mental health issues. We did a whole series on adolescent mental health recently. So there's just so many things that need worked on.
It is, as we said, the budget's here. Maybe some of these things can be channeled with money via the budget.
One thing I meant to look into in the judicial report is I know last year they were talking about even the infrastructure as challenges that the courts face. And I meant to look into this more recent report to see if any of that has been addressed. I didn't get a chance to see that. I don't know if you saw anything.
I didn't say anything about that. I did see the age-old issue of facilities.
Yeah, and that just leads to backlogs of cases as well.
Well,
And
actually, one thing they did say the backlog had been addressed. There was
okay,
still a backlog. There was one case going back to 2012, I think,
right.
and I think that was because they just found the person or something like that. But the backlog had been substantially tackled by the looks of things.
Okay.
But there were still complaints about space, and of course, not in this report. There's been ongoing concerns over safety of
Okay.
judges and prosecutors and defence as well. That wasn't addressed in this report. But yeah, there are bigger issues going on in the court, not just this. But
Yeah.
yeah, but to call it an epidemic, judge calling it an epidemic. But you know what? We talk about an epidemic of violent crime. There's an epidemic of road deaths as well. Nobody
Well, I
talks
mean,
about it.
since our previous podcast when we talked about road deaths has been another road fatality over
15
the
years old
weekend.
girl.
Yeah.
How sad is that? She had a
Oh,
whole
tragedy.
life before her.
Yeah.
Whole
I can't
life
imagine
before her.
how the family and it's. I can't imagine.
No, I can't. I don't want to. And I mean that. I just don't want to because it would just be such a depressing thought. But again, will we see that in the budget? Will we see the Road Safety Council's budget quadrupled? No.
Well, they were talking about introducing more speed cameras, right? So we'll have to see what's in the budget for that too.
Are the new cameras doing speed now? Oh, that's a big
I
park.
don't know. I know they've talked about it.
Thought so.
I'm kind of torn between it in terms of civil liberties, but yeah,
It's a tricky one, isn't it? You've got to balance that and life and death. And to me, life and death trumps civil liberties. In a way, not to
right.
dismiss the civil liberties whatsoever. I would be very, very concerned if these cameras started using AI technology to try and identify people. That would be serious and concerning in terms of civil liberties. Um, I don't know, maybe we waffled enough. Um, we're going to be back on tomorrow afternoon, Friday afternoon, give our thoughts on the budget. We'll do a podcast special and we'll try and highlight a few things to explain what they mean to you or how they could affect you. It's going to be an interesting day tomorrow. It's going to be a busy day. And will David Burt leave a legacy?
Tune in tomorrow.
All right. I will see you tomorrow, Jonathan.
Sounds good, man.
Take care. See ya. Bye.
Bye.